Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Susan Raymond's life unfolded quietly in a small coastal city far from glamour, where mornings began before sunrise and ended long after the streets had emptied. She lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment tucked above a closed-down bookstore, its peeling paint and creaking stairs reflecting the kind of life she had learned to endure without complaint. Susan was not loud, not dramatic, and not bitter despite everything she had lost. She worked as a private early learning tutor, specializing in children with developmental delays, a job that paid modestly but aligned with her deeply nurturing spirit. Her days were structured around lesson plans, handwritten notes, and carefully packed lunches. Yet beneath the calm routine lived a woman who had once dreamed of something far bigger. Susan loved classical music, long evening walks, and journaling by lamplight, where she wrote not about regret, but about hope. Hope that life could still surprise her with something gentle. Her past had shaped her resilience. Susan grew up in a working-class household where dignity mattered more than appearances. Her father, a mechanic, taught her patience and precision, while her mother instilled compassion and emotional intelligence. When they passed away within 2 years of each other, Susan learned what loneliness truly meant, but also learned independence. She financed her own education through scholarships and part-time work, never leaning on anyone longer than necessary. Though she was soft-spoken, Susan possessed a steel-like endurance that revealed itself only in moments of crisis. She dreamed of building a peaceful life, raising children who felt safe and loved, and proving that kindness was not weakness. What she did not dream of was revenge, fame, or validation. She simply wanted peace. That peace, however, had been fragile ever since her marriage ended. Though Susan rarely spoke of Nathaniel James anymore, his name still lingered in places she avoided. She had loved him sincerely, deeply, and without calculation. She never imagined that loving someone could one day place her at the center of humiliation. Yet Susan refused to define herself by pain. Every morning, she looked in the mirror and reminded herself she was more than what people assumed. She was more than the woman left behind. She was building something quietly, and no one, not even Nathaniel, knew just how far she had already come. Nathaniel James lived in a world of glass towers, polished marble floors, and measured ambition. His mornings began in a penthouse overlooking the harbor, where city lights dimmed only after he left for work. As the founder of a rapidly growing real estate investment firm, Nathaniel was admired for his calculated brilliance and feared for his emotional detachment. He was tall, well-groomed, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed control was the ultimate form of success. To colleagues, he was disciplined and decisive. To investors, he was visionary. But behind the flawless suits and curated reputation lived a man deeply uncomfortable with vulnerability. Nathaniel had not always been this way. His hunger for status came from a childhood marked by scarcity and shame. Raised in a neighborhood where success was admired but rarely achieved, he promised himself that poverty would never define him again. Every risk he took, every relationship he entered, was filtered through one question: does this elevate me? It was this mindset that gradually eroded his marriage to Susan. Where she valued emotional connection, he prioritized optics. Where she sought peace, he chased prestige. Over time, he began to see her simplicity as a liability rather than a strength, convincing himself that he had outgrown the woman who once stood beside him when he had nothing. When Nathaniel met Evelyn White, everything shifted. Evelyn was refined, socially fluent, and deeply aware of how power moved through rooms. She admired Nathaniel's success openly and encouraged his ambition relentlessly. Where Susan asked for emotional presence, Evelyn offered validation without demands. The contrast felt intoxicating. Nathaniel told himself he deserved more, that love should feel like momentum, not stillness. He justified his growing distance from Susan as evolution, ignoring the truth that he was running from the discomfort of being truly known. And so, without realizing it, Nathaniel began rewriting his own history, placing himself at the center of a narrative where Susan was no longer essential. Susan and Nathaniel's marriage did not collapse in a single moment. It eroded quietly, painfully, through unspoken disappointments. Their apartment had once been filled with laughter and shared dreams, But gradually silence replaced conversation. Nathaniel spent more nights at the office, citing pressure and deadlines, while Susan waited with carefully prepared meals that often went untouched. She tried to bridge the growing gap with patience, suggesting counseling, weekend trips, or even simple dinners without phones. Each effort was met with polite dismissal. Nathaniel had already begun seeing her concern as obstruction rather than love. The emotional distance soon became impossible to ignore. Nathaniel criticized Susan's career choices subtly at first, suggesting she could aim higher or do more. Susan felt herself shrinking under the weight of expectations she never agreed to. She had supported Nathaniel during his earliest struggles, sacrificing her comfort so he could pursue his ambitions. Yet now, her sacrifices were invisible to him. When she sensed another presence in his life, Nathaniel denied it, not with passion, but with indifference. That indifference hurt more than any confession could have. The end came quietly. No shouting, no public spectacle. Nathaniel told her he felt constrained, that he needed something different. Susan did not beg. She did not fight. She packed her belongings with trembling hands and left with her dignity intact. What she did not tell Nathaniel was that she was carrying a secret, one that would change everything. She walked away from the marriage not because she was weak, but because she refused to raise children in a home where love had become conditional. And in that silent departure, Susan Raymond stepped into a life no one expected her to survive, let alone redefine. Life after the separation tested Susan in ways she never anticipated. She moved into her small apartment with limited savings and no safety net, forcing herself to adapt quickly. Pregnancy had altered her body, her energy, and her emotional landscape, yet she carried herself with quiet resolve. Susan continued working until it became physically impossible, tutoring children during the day and preparing lessons late into the night. She avoided social gatherings, not out of shame, but out of a desire to protect her peace. She had learned that healing required silence, not explanation. When the twins were born, Susan named them Noah and Lily, names that symbolize renewal and purity. The early months were exhausting beyond words. Sleepless nights blended into anxious mornings, and moments of joy were often accompanied by fear. Yet Susan found strength in the smallest victories. Noah's first laugh, Lily's steady heartbeat against her chest. She taught herself to be both mother and father, caregiver and provider. She learned to budget meticulously, to ask for help when necessary, and to trust her instincts. The children became her anchor, grounding her in purpose and reminding her daily that her sacrifices mattered. Despite the challenges, Susan refused to live in bitterness. She read parenting books, attended free workshops, and created a nurturing environment for her children. Her hobbies shifted. Music played softly during feeding times. Journaling became therapy, and walks turned into moments of reflection with a stroller by her side. Susan dreamed of giving her children stability, education, and love without resentment. She never spoke ill of Nathaniel, not because she forgave him entirely, but because she believed her children deserved a future unburdened by her pain. What she didn't know was that her quiet perseverance was setting the stage for a revelation that would shake every assumption made about her. As the years passed, Susan's life began to transform slowly but decisively. Her reputation as a gifted tutor spread, and parents sought her expertise for children others had labeled difficult. Susan's patience and structured methods produced remarkable results, drawing attention from educational consultants and private institutions. She remained humble, but opportunity began to knock, first as part-time consulting, then as a full-time role coordinating special learning programs. For the first time in years, Susan felt seen not for what she lacked, but for what she offered. Financial stability followed, but Susan did not rush into luxury. She invested carefully, saved deliberately, and prioritized her children's future. Her evenings were filled with reading, strategic planning, and self-education. She enrolled in business management courses online, determined to expand her impact beyond tutoring. Susan's growth was not loud or flashy. It was deliberate. She formed meaningful friendships with professionals who respected her intelligence and values. Through them, she learned about investment opportunities and long-term planning, slowly building a foundation no one else noticed. Motherhood remained central to everything she did. Noah was curious and analytical, always asking questions, while Lily was intuitive and emotionally perceptive. Susan nurtured their individuality, encouraging creativity, empathy, and confidence. She dreamed of a life where her children would never feel ashamed of where they came from, and though she lived modestly, Susan carried herself with grace and self-assurance. She no longer felt defined by loss. She was becoming someone new, someone quietly powerful. Nathaniel's rise to prominence was swift and highly publicized. His company expanded into international markets, earning him accolades and media attention. Invitations poured in from elite circles, and his name became synonymous with ambition and success. Yet, as his wealth grew, so did his need for validation. Nathaniel surrounded himself with people who praised him endlessly, rarely challenging his decisions or questioning his narrative. In this carefully curated world, there was no space for reminders of his past. Evelyn White fit seamlessly into this life. She was elegant, socially strategic, and deeply invested in appearances. Her background in corporate branding made her invaluable to Nathaniel's public image. Together, they attended galas, hosted fundraisers, and became fixtures in high society. Evelyn encouraged Nathaniel to project success unapologetically, reinforcing his belief that love was about alignment, not sacrifice. Their relationship was built on shared ambition, mutual benefit, and calculated affection. Yet beneath the polished surface, cracks formed. Evelyn was observant and possessive, often testing Nathaniel's loyalty in subtle ways. She wanted security, not just status. Nathaniel, on the other hand, struggled with restlessness. He convinced himself that his past no longer mattered. Yet Susan's absence lingered in unexpected moments. He dismissed these thoughts quickly, focusing instead on the future he was building. When he decided to marry Evelyn, it wasn't out of passion, it was out of finality. The wedding would symbolize his complete separation from the life he once lived. And in his mind, there was one final gesture left to make. The wedding plans were extravagant from the start. Nathaniel insisted on a venue that reflected his success, a grand estate overlooking the sea, designed to impress every guest in attendance. Evelyn took control of the planning, selecting designers, menus, and guest lists with surgical precision. Every detail was curated to project exclusivity. Yet, as the guest list expanded, Nathaniel felt an itch he couldn't ignore, a lingering desire to assert dominance over his past, to prove, once and for all, how far he had risen. It was during a late evening review of invitations that Nathaniel mentioned Susan's name. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, masking her curiosity with composure. Nathaniel explained his rationale coolly, suggesting it would be closure and a demonstration of maturity. Evelyn agreed, though unease flickered briefly behind her smile. The invitation was sent without ceremony, formal, impersonal, and deliberate. Nathaniel imagined Susan receiving it, picturing her embarrassment, her inability to compare with Evelyn's grandeur. He told himself it was harmless. He told himself it was deserved. The invitation traveled across the city quietly, landing in Susan's mailbox on an ordinary afternoon. Susan read it once, then again, her expression unreadable. She did not cry. She did not panic. She folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. The past had come knocking, but Susan Raymond was no longer the woman Nathaniel remembered. Susan spent days in reflection after receiving the invitation. She did not react impulsively. Instead, she observed her emotions with clarity, recognizing the sting, the disbelief, and the underlying insult. She knew why she had been invited. This was not reconciliation or kindness. It was spectacle. Susan considered declining quietly, but something deeper stirred within her. Not pride, not revenge, but truth. She realized that hiding would only reinforce a narrative she never authored. She consulted no one at first. She continued her routines, caring for Noah and Lily, attending work, and maintaining normalcy. But internally, Susan evaluated her readiness, not just to attend the wedding, but to confront the weight of her past publicly. She revisited her journey, acknowledging how far she had come. The decision to attend was not about Nathaniel. It was about standing firmly in her own story without shame. Preparation began subtly. Susan reached out to a financial advisor she trusted, finalized arrangements she had long postponed, and ensured her children were secure and supported. She chose silence over explanation, letting her actions speak when the time came. Her confidence was not performative. It was rooted. Susan was no longer defined by poverty or abandonment. She was a woman rebuilt by resilience. And she would walk into that wedding not as a guest seeking approval, but as someone complete. As the wedding date approached, Nathaniel's anticipation turned into fixation. He imagined Susan's arrival repeatedly, each scenario reinforcing his belief in superiority. He shared none of this with Evelyn, who sensed his distraction but misinterpreted it as pre-wedding stress. She focused on perfecting the event, ensuring every guest would witness her ascent into the role of Mrs. James. Yet beneath her poise, Evelyn feared comparison, not with Susan's wealth, but with her authenticity. Susan, meanwhile, made a decision that would alter perceptions permanently. She arranged transportation through a private firm she had quietly invested in years earlier. The choice was deliberate, symbolic, and final. She also prepared her children, not with explanations of pain, but with lessons in confidence and dignity. Noah and Lily were dressed simply yet elegantly, embodying Susan's values of grace without excess. The night before the wedding, Susan stood by her window, watching the city lights reflect off the glass. She felt no anger, only clarity. Tomorrow was not about humiliation. It was about truth stepping into the light. The wedding day dawned bright and immaculate. The estate buzzed with activity as guests arrived in luxury vehicles, dressed in designer attire. Nathaniel stood among them, confident and composed, scanning faces unconsciously. He was waiting. Evelyn, radiant and poised, greeted guests with practiced charm, unaware of the moment fast approaching. Across the city, Susan prepared quietly. She dressed in understated elegance, her posture calm, her expression serene. Noah and Lily stood beside her, holding her hands with trust. When the Bentley arrived, its presence commanded attention without announcement. Susan took a breath, steady and sure. The journey to the venue unfolded in silence. Susan did not rehearse words or anticipate reactions. She simply arrived, whole, unbroken, and ready. The arrival of the Bentley shifted the atmosphere of the estate before anyone understood why. Conversation slowed, laughter faltered, and heads turned instinctively toward the long driveway. The vehicle moved with quiet authority, its polished exterior reflecting the white floral arches and marble columns of the venue. Guests whispered among themselves, assuming it belonged to a late-arriving executive or foreign dignitary. Nathaniel noticed the interruption and frowned slightly, irritation flickering across his face. This was his day. Everything was supposed to unfold according to plan. He adjusted his cufflinks and turned, curiosity tugging at his attention. When the Bentley came to a halt, the driver stepped out and opened the rear door with deliberate calm. Susan emerged first. She wore a tailored, elegant dress, simple yet striking, accentuating her poise rather than competing for attention. Her posture was straight, her expression composed, and her presence undeniable. The murmurs intensified as people tried to place her face. She did not look lost, ashamed, or uncertain. She looked grounded. Then Noah and Lily stepped out beside her, each holding one of her hands. The children's resemblance to Nathaniel was unmistakable, though no one spoke aloud yet. Nathaniel froze. His breath caught painfully in his chest as recognition crashed into him, not just of Susan, but of the children. The color drained from his face as reality rewrote itself in an instant. This was not the scene he had imagined. This was not humiliation. This was confrontation in its most dignified form. Susan met his gaze calmly, offering no smile, no bitterness, only truth. And in that moment, the power dynamic Nathaniel believed he controlled shattered completely. The ceremony paused without instruction. Guests stood awkwardly, unsure whether to sit or watch. Evelyn sensed something was wrong before she fully understood it. She followed Nathaniel's frozen stare and saw Susan standing there with the children. A sharp, unfamiliar unease settled in her chest. Evelyn prided herself on reading situations, on being prepared. But this was not part of any calculation. She approached Nathaniel quietly, her voice low but tight, asking who they were. Nathaniel could not answer immediately. His throat felt constricted, his thoughts chaotic. The children stood calmly, unafraid, their small fingers wrapped securely around Susan's hands. Susan finally spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough to be heard. She thanked the host for the invitation and stated simply that she had come to honor it. Her voice carried strength without accusation. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's composure cracked. She looked at the children again, studying their faces, their posture, their calm resemblance. Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. This was not a coincidence. This was not a performance. This was consequence. Evelyn felt exposed, not publicly, but personally. She realized then that the life she believed she had secured rested on incomplete truths, and those truths were standing right in front of her. Whispers erupted into quiet conversations, then into restrained disbelief. Guests exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others riveted. The ceremony was officially halted, though no announcement was made. Nathaniel stepped forward instinctively, then stopped, unsure what to say or do. For the first time in years, he had no strategy. Susan had not come to accuse him. She had come simply as herself, and that terrified him more than any confrontation could have. Susan guided Noah and Lily to a seat near the aisle, ensuring they were comfortable. She did not seek attention, yet attention followed her naturally. Her calm presence unsettled Nathaniel profoundly. He realized then that she was no longer the woman he left behind. She was someone transformed, not by wealth alone, but by purpose and clarity. The humiliation he had intended for her recoiled sharply onto him. Evelyn watched the scene unfold with growing detachment. She felt eyes on her, not accusatory, but curious. The admiration she usually commanded had shifted. This was not about status anymore. It was about truth, and truth did not favor appearances. Evelyn excused herself briefly, retreating to a private area, her thoughts racing. She questioned everything she believed she knew about Nathaniel and about herself. The wedding could not proceed as planned. Advisors and coordinators attempted discreet damage control, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. Nathaniel was urged to step aside and address the situation privately. He approached Susan cautiously, his voice low and strained. He asked to speak with her alone. Susan agreed, instructing a trusted acquaintance to watch the children. Her calm remained unbroken. In a quiet room overlooking the gardens, Nathaniel struggled to speak. He asked questions he already knew the answers to, searching for denial where none existed. Susan answered honestly, without embellishment. She explained that she had chosen not to inform him, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. She had wanted peace, stability, and dignity for her children. Nathaniel listened, each word dismantling the narrative he had built to justify his choices. Susan made one thing clear. She had not come for reconciliation, nor revenge. She had come because hiding no longer served her. She had built a life, protected her children, and healed. This moment was not about him. It was about standing in truth. Nathaniel realizing that his power had always been an illusion. Susan had never been weak. He had simply underestimated her strength. Evelyn confronted Nathaniel later that afternoon, her voice controlled but firm. She asked him directly if the children were his. Nathaniel did not lie. The honesty, though overdue, landed heavily. Evelyn felt something collapse within her, not heartbreak, but clarity. She understood then that she had built her future on partial truths and selective blindness. Evelyn made a decision that surprised even herself. She chose not to proceed with the wedding, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. She told Nathaniel that she deserved a life built on transparency, not hidden histories. Her departure was quiet, dignified, and final. Guests were informed discreetly that the ceremony would not continue. The estate emptied slowly, conversations buzzing with speculation and awe. Susan prepared to leave as quietly as she had arrived. She gathered Noah and Lily, thanked the host, and made her way back toward the Bentley. She did not look back. She did not need to. The past had been confronted, not rewritten. And that was enough. Nathaniel watched Susan leave, a hollow ache settling deep within him. The silence that followed the guest's departure was unbearable. For the first time, he confronted the full weight of his decisions, not as abstract regrets, but as living realities. He had children he did not know, a woman he had underestimated, a life he had dismantled in pursuit of validation. Susan returned home with her children, resuming her life without interruption. The experience had not shaken her. It had confirmed her growth. Noah and Lily asked questions gently, and Susan answered with honesty appropriate to their understanding. She emphasized love, responsibility, and self-worth. That night, she slept peacefully, unburdened by unresolved emotions. News of the wedding's collapse spread quietly through professional circles. Susan did not engage with it. Her focus remained on her children, her work, and her future. The chapter with Nathaniel had closed, not with bitterness, but with finality. Nathaniel sought legal counsel, not to reclaim control, but to understand his responsibilities. He wanted to be present, though he knew presence could not be demanded. He wrote Susan a letter, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging accountability. He expressed a desire to know his children, should Susan ever allow it. Susan received the letter and took time to reflect. She did not respond immediately. Her priority was stability. She consulted advisors, ensuring any future interaction would protect her children emotionally and legally. Susan was no longer reactive. She was deliberate. When she finally replied, her response was measured. She outlined clear boundaries and expectations. If Nathaniel wished to be involved, it would be on terms centered on the children, not guilt, not image, not control. Nathaniel accepted without resistance. He understood now that trust was earned slowly. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. Susan's professional ventures expanded, allowing her greater flexibility and influence. She invested in educational initiatives, quietly creating opportunities for families like hers. Her success was not performative. It was purposeful. Noah and Lily thrived, confident and curious. They grew surrounded by love, structure, and honesty. Susan encouraged their interests, nurturing their individuality. Her dreams evolved, not of recognition, but of legacy. Nathaniel began the long process of rebuilding himself, not his image, but his character. He stepped back from public life, reassessing his values. The man he had been no longer fit the life he wanted to lead. Susan encountered new possibilities, not romantic at first, but personal. She reconnected with joy, rediscovered creativity, and allowed herself to imagine happiness without fear. She understood now that strength did not require isolation. Nathaniel respected her distance, honoring the boundaries she set. Their interactions remained minimal, focused solely on the children's well-being. Over time, trust began to form, not romantic, but responsible. Susan realized that healing was not about erasing the past, but integrating it without letting it define her. She had done that, fully. Susan Raymond stood at the edge of a new chapter, one built on choice, not survival. She had walked into a space meant to humiliate her and emerged with her dignity intact, her truth acknowledged and her future secure. She had not arrived to prove anything, yet she had redefined everything. Nathaniel James learned that success without integrity was hollow. His greatest lesson did not come from loss of status, but from the realization that love demanded accountability. Evelyn White moved forward with clarity, choosing herself over illusion. The Bentley had arrived quietly, but the truth it carried changed everything. And from that moment on, Susan Raymond's life was no longer shaped by what she endured, but by what she chose next. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.